Good morning, traders. A happy Friday slash expiration cycle day out there to you all. Hope that y'all had a nice evening there. Quite the interesting trading day we had yesterday, and then today we'll have our December ES getting off the board there, and our third Friday of the month, so our quad witching date here. So we'll have that going for us. Typically heightened volume and everything there, so usually subject to additional gyrations. And outside of that, as far as our economic calendar goes for here today, we do have an 8:30 figure there. That's going to be our Empire State Manufacturing Index figure there. So good to make note of that. It's listed as a red impact figure there. So we'll want to take that into account. But without any further ado here, we'll come into take a look at these daily charts. As we know yesterday, we made pretty good progress. We put in a high of 47.91.75 in the ES after having our essentially 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days of low to high trading here in the index futures. So we'll certainly want to keep an eye on the previous day's high. In the overnight session, we've been trading as an inside range bar. So previous day's high, like we said, a little further up above there, 47.91.75 in the overnight session. We did trade up to 47.89 even. So not too far off. And then of course, basis the March contract and everything, we know that we're keeping ourselves still maintained and holding above our previous reaction high there, 47.38.50. So we not only been trading above it, but holding above it there for the past 2 days. So in case we loosened up at all, that would be a point of interest down below. But for now, doing a fairly good job of maintaining themselves. And like we said, it is expiration cycle there today. So of our previous day's high marked off, and per usual, we have to take into account our pit session range. So obviously, since we're inside the previous day's range for now, we'd be opening inside of the pit session range. But as you get closer towards the opening, certainly would want to see where we're poised to open with respect to yesterday's pit session range. Here on the hourly charts, very similar idea. We had our reading from the previous day's high, which we've fallen a little shy on. We do have points of interest up above. We have like 48.08 in case we pushed up any further, since we know we don't have too many additional reference points up above. But for now, doing a fairly good job of maintaining their own. And then, like we said, if we test up any further, we'd be running back and dealing with the previous day's high. So we'll keep a watch here. 120-minute chart still having that corrective activity on the slow line here on the oscillator without doing too much damage. So fairly constructive there for our ES. We have our DAX over here as well. DAX having its first close below that 5 SMA during yesterday's action. So, of course, the main level, like we were saying yesterday, that we'll want to keep an eye on today because that'll give us a nice reference point to see whether we can come down and hold ourselves with a higher low at all, or if we start to breach that low that we put in from yesterday. So we have 16,859 there, basis the DAX. Also, so far an inside range bar from the Globex session or overnight. We are still back on the other side of the 5 SMA, but have not quite breached previous day's low. That comes in at 16,859. And we'll grab this hourly chart here just to kind of dissect this in a little more further detail. So on the 15-minute data, as we come back down, that previous reaction low is going to be quite substantial. We can even put a colored line on it there just because we know it was the first close below the 5 SMA, but we still would like to see some technical conditions here to be a little bit more supportive of that. So for initial starters, looks like they'll be working towards the tail from yesterday first, and then we'll want to see how they were to hold, if at all, as they test closer towards that region in the DAX after our outside down bar. So they did test back above the 5 SMA overnight, but certainly, yeah, we got a full day in front of us, so not necessarily closing above the 5 SMA there, but they did test back above it overnight there. So that's where we stand on our DAX. And then next on up, we have the Euro currency here, also fairly active from yesterday's trading. We know that we did indeed fall just a bit shy on the 1.107 easy number there as far as the dailies go, and they're 240 minutes, so good impulse nonetheless, but tested up, kind of respecting our inside zone on our first movement up. And we're just ducking back below the 1.1 even mark in the case of the euro currency after having quite the advancement. So we're pulling back, trading somewhere in the middle of yesterday's daily bar. And then as we take in our intraday data into account, whether 120 minute or 240-minute data, the 120-minute will just show a little better rhythm here on our oscillator. So falling shy on making the full test up, and then coming into the session today, we've already reverted back or have had some pullback to the 120-minute moving average, and for now, we're kind of respecting and holding there. I do have points of interest, further down below in case we slip down any further. 1.09615 would be a little bit more of a caution zone, but for now, would be monitoring them to see how they want to trade and respond around this 120-minute moving average there for this euro currency. So that'll give us some nice zones to keep tabs on there for that one. Three very strong days of low to high, so just having their first consolidation day just to do some digesting from some of the advancement they made during yesterday's trading. That's there with our euro currency. We also have the GC here. This gold also is interesting on the 120-minute view. We had a similar feeling yesterday, right, as we came back up into this little previous window or previous zone that we had put in there with the gold. But we did make a fairly okay test there yesterday. We put in a high of 2063. 2062.9 to be exact. But what we were doing at the time is looking back above all these previous tail zones that we had on the gold from when we were originally coming down. So, gold did just fine there. So we have 2062.9 as the previous day's high. And we'll want to note the slow line starting to correct here on the 120-minute display. So we have a bit of a region here. 2036 is a little bit more of the caution area because that's where we had our impulse bar to the upside. So for now, they're maintaining their own. They've just come down and put in a slightly lower high here on the 120-minute display. So I do want to take that into account and note the fact it's probably similar to the euro currency that we could perhaps work a little closer towards this 120-minute moving average there in the case of that gold. So we'll keep an eye out for that. See how the GC pans out and starts to play off of the 8 a.m. reading. For now, just keeping itself in a bit more of a rotational mode off the 8 a.m. reading. And then we have the crude and the bonds here before our little round of morning data. The crude, we know yesterday it tested above but didn't really close back above the 72.37. That was basis the daily charts from when we originally had our mark down from our 5 days of high to low or one time framing. We were slicing through that 72.37 from November 16th. So we did a good job knifing through that. We came back up yesterday and tested above it briefly, intra bar, and then we backed off and closed beneath it. So 72.37 still as being a nice valid zone in the case of the crude to keep an eye on there. Daily EMA would come in further up above at 73.37, but we want to take this one step at a time because the 72.37 is kind of a substantial zone there in the crude. It was more important when we were first initially breaching it, but still has been holding itself with a bit of value there. So if we blow up this 120 here is that previous cycle low that we had. So we came down. We already talked about this series of low develop mode that we took 2 days to fix up, and then again impulse down 2 days to fix up. So now we're just holding and maintaining at the upper end of all this work. So between 71.96 and 72.37, those are little zones of interest for the crude to keep an eye on and monitor there. So shrink that one back down, but some nice areas to be aware of there in the old CL. And then lastly here, very impressive, mind you, they've advanced a little further, is that of the bonds here. And with these bonds, not really a whole lot to fault with them either. We know that we had our 2-period rate of change highs yesterday here on the daily bar, so good extension so far. We've been kind of fitting in with the rhythm. We still traded higher first. We put in a higher high, but outside of that, we have been kind of consolidating and digesting some of the advancement we had made yesterday. So coming over here to the hourlies or the 120-minute data, you see we pulled back, squeezed out our higher high there short term, and just, being aware or cautious. 120-minute display, you can see our little hint of loss of momentum or sell divergence that we had forming. but we still made a higher high on this 120-minute display. So, still impressive. Slow line's correcting itself back down. So we'll keep in watch on the bonds. They already made their higher high, so we have 123.30 to keep in mind on any further up above. And then 122.29. It's a ways down there, but that would be where that 120-minute EMA comes in case the bonds consolidate or roll over at all. That would be a level that we can keep a watch on. So, with that said, I'm going to dial it back here. This will also be a nice day to see the view on the market profile display, since a lot of these markets did have some good advancements there yesterday. So, we'll have Campton coming on in about another 30 minutes there to have a look at that for our day. And we got our DAX on the top left. We'll keep our ES here on the side and see how we settle in here from our morning data points. Once again, that's our Empire State Manufacturing Index there due out for the U.S. and that'll be coming out in just about another 5 minutes here, 4.5 minutes. So we'll let that settle in and see what we have lining up for this day in front of us here.